Welcome to the Bellevue Chapel podcast, where we share sermons, series discussions, and topical conversations. Today, Andrew Fairfield shares the message titled, Where is My Heart?
This morning is the sixth of our studies in the Sermon on the Mount series, arguably the most famous and impactful sermon in history. Not this morning, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus teaches what it means in his eyes to live righteously. The Bible Project website, and we're not going to go through all the detail, suggests a breakdown of the sermon as on this slide. We've just come through sections on the religious practices of giving, praying, and fasting. And hopefully, if you've been here over the past few weeks, you'll remember those. And now we come into ways in which our Christian calling can impact on our private lives, living rightly with God and neighbors, and starting with money and wealth. And today our thinking comes under the heading of, where is my heart? Where is my heart? And the briefing notes for me go as follows, so you can see if I've actually stuck to them or not. It's been said that we would only really know how much we love Jesus if all we had in life was Jesus. In other words, the cares of life and the deceitfulness of wealth so often become for us idols that dominate and take over our hearts, such that our love and service for God becomes secondary. So let's look at the passage and see what we see. Well, verses 19 to 21 could be reasonably described, invest wisely, although that feels a bit boring as an encouragement, but invest wisely. But maybe to give it another perspective, in 1956, that's even before I was born, a young man and his 4 friends were so determined to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with the Huarani tribe in Ecuador, despite their known violence towards outsiders, that they planned to visit the tribe. After gift drops and other preparatory measures, as seemed prudent, they did land their plane on a sandbar in the river, and they were all killed by the Huarani. And Jim Elliot's diary famously contained the quote, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose." He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. And he also references in the diary Luke 16 and 9. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Well, Christian martyrdom is obviously the big picture of Jim Elliot's story. But the Luke 16 passage is clearly another way into our passage this morning. Invest wisely in God's kingdom rather than putting all your effort into acquiring things on earth. Spend on heavenly things. Jesus reminds us of the impermanence of worldly treasures and therefore the ultimate futility of cherishing and chasing them. The moth, the vermin, the thieves, and everything else. So even the finest of clothes wear out and are eaten by moths. I wouldn't know, but if I did have the finest of clothes, they could wear out and be eaten by moths. And I just have to tell you that 15,000 that you've stuffed under your mattress, it's being stolen as you're sitting here this morning. Stick it in the bank. And at current rates of inflation, you might as well not bother. Even your stock market value could crash at any time. Jesus is saying, if you want an investment with an eternal return, coupled with complete security, invest it in God's kingdom, not an earthly one. Now, if your independent financial advisor says something like that to you, get rid of them immediately, because they can't give you that offer. An investment with an eternal return, coupled with complete security. Invest in God's kingdom and not in an earthly one. And as I was thinking about this and some of the practical outworkings of this, I thought about the fact that we've got quite a good concept of philanthropy. We understand what it means. So Andrew Carnegie builds the library in Dunfermline, the swimming pool, whatever else. So philanthropy from rich people is very well understood. People know about it. Big trusts that benefit societies by building public buildings or whatever. And so we have a kind of reasonable understanding that rich people give money away. And yes, there's tax benefits, but also because they probably want to do something good with their lives. So whether it's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or whatever it is, we kind of have that concept of giving. But I hope I can tell this story without crying, actually. But there was something that really hit me was a story that I heard during the Bosnian War. And an Albanian man who gave his life savings for the blessing of refugees, Bosnian refugees. His life savings, $6. $6. What we would pay for a sandwich. And I remember thinking, that's when it's real. And I wonder if there's a danger, and so this is where you have to think it through under God's guidance. Is there a danger that for us in the middle, because I'm guessing we're not that poor and we're not that rich, that we don't think about giving of our money as being actually a calling of God? And we need to. And there is a sense in which those in the middle hang on even more tightly than those at the top or those at the bottom. And I think that's something to challenge us with this morning. So maybe in practical things, spending £40 to express your love in flowers to someone who has been bereaved could be a kingdom investment. Giving to a homeless charity or a Christian missionary endeavor. Taking a depressed friend out for coffee, or your regular giving to your church. Giving to Tear Fund that brings relief to those around the world in great poverty and distress. Or Christian Aid. There are many ways of spending your money on things that have a lasting kingdom impact. But there's more. God's kingdom is not just about doing, but loving. And I had told someone that I'd contemplated wearing Jerry Halliwell's dress for this, but I thought that might make you remember the sermon for all the wrong reasons. It's all about what you want, what you really, really want. For those of you too young to remember the Spice Girls, that was one of their songs. Where is your heart? So I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. Great lyrics from the late 90s, I guess. What do you really want? For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. It's a bit like the earlier thinking of the sermon where intentions and desires come as much under the challenge of God as actual actions. The practice of adultery has been condemned for generations, but Jesus was saying even to lust after a woman might as well be adultery in terms of the moral breach, hatred and murder, etc. It's not just what we do with our money, but it's what's driving that. If our deepest longings are for wealth and power in this world, then we can be sure that they're not for God's kingdom. Set your heart in the right place. I hope you won't mind if we're a bit counterintuitive and skip the next section for a moment and come back to it. Hopefully it will make sense in the end. But as we go into the final section of this thing that we're considering, this passage we're considering, you can see people thinking, oh, can't we do both? Surely we display God's blessing on us in a show of ostentatious wealth. We exemplify the truth that when we honor God, he honors us. Not tacky bling, you understand, but just tasteful excess. Surely that's okay. And Jesus says, no. Who is your master? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. We need to decide. This is the Trinity on the right. If you're trying to work out a picture of God's a bit hard to do. We need to decide to put God first and above all other things, and that includes money. Again, we're asking the question about what we want, what we really, really want. Only God deserves first place. I remember a speaker talking about one of the distinctions to be drawn between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of this world. It's God's pleasure to love people and use money. This world is characterized by those who love money and use people. It's God's pleasure to love people and use money. And this world is characterized by those who love money and use people. So where is your heart and who is your master? So let's go back now to verses 22 and 23. In this section that we've been discussing, Jesus is clearly talking about money and wealth, starting with where's your heart and ending with who's your master, and referencing money in both instances. How then do we read verses 22 and 23? Did Jesus have an apparent mental aberration and talk about something at best very loosely related, or did he go off on a complete tangent? And the answer, of course, is no. And in reading a lot of online commentary on this, there are many differing emphases and things that people draw out. But I'm going to put my money, excuse the weak joke, on a particular interpretation, but feel free to disagree. There's consideration, obviously, of the picture of the eyes as being windows into the soul. And we can understand that kind of picture, that idea. We recognize the bright eyes of a child, the sad eyes of a victim of war, or someone in terminal decline. Thus, if your heart is full of darkness, it shows in your interactions with the world outside. For others, the emphasis is on the idea of the eyes being where light is admitted to the body. When they do their job well, the body is flooded with light, and the body can navigate the world revealed by that light. When they don't work, you might stumble around in darkness in a reality that you can't correctly perceive at all. And the light referred to is the spiritual light of God's revelation, and the darkness, the absence of that light. And both of these might illuminate the need for the revelation that light brings, to understand Jesus' teaching here, or the need to have a good heart, to live in the light. But there is another interpretation, and that might be more helpful here, which directly references money. Good or bad eyes. So looking for a more Hebraic context for Jesus' words, he may be referencing a Jewish figure of speech, contrasting the idea of having a good eye with having a bad eye. So I'm going to read some English translations from the Old Testament, and that might help you to see that the underlying text in terms of the Hebrew or the Greek is going to be slightly more interesting, more nuanced, if that's the right expression. So in the NIV, Proverbs 22:9 says, "The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor." In the King James Version, though, it says, "He that hath a bountiful eye shall be blessed, for he giveth of his bread to the poor." Or the Young's literal translation, "The good of eye, he is blessed, for he hath given of his bread to the poor." And if you go on to Proverbs 28, again, there's a variety. The NIV, "The stingy are eager to get rich and are unaware that poverty awaits them." But in the King James, "He that hasteth to be rich hath an evil eye, and considereth not that poverty shall come upon him." Or the Young's literal, "Troubled for wealth is the man with an evil eye, and he knoweth not that want doth meet him." And in the Old Testament, the Hebrew words are ayin tovah, and I think it's ayin ra for good and bad eyes. I'm getting slightly conflicting lookups on the word, so if you want to check them later, please do. In non-biblical Jewish writings, like the Talmud, the concept of a good eye or a generous eye being a mark of good moral character appears. So from the Talmud, those who have a good eye, a humble spirit, and a lowly soul are the disciples of our forefather Abraham. Those who have an evil eye, an arrogant spirit, and a greedy soul are the disciples of Balaam the wicked. And that's from the Mishnah. And the Greek forms in the passage are ophthalmos, this is now the passage of study, are ophthalmos hapless and ophthalmos poneros. So ophthalmos, you'll probably sort of pick up from English words, but the other words are hapless and poneros. Hapless, single, undivided, uncomplicated, a good eye. And poneros, evil, wicked, or morally corrupt. And the Matthew 6 uses could be contrasted with Matthew 20 and 15, where in the NIV it's, don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? And the King James, is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil because I am good? And again, the word is poneros in the Greek. So I don't think it's unreasonable, therefore, to consider Jesus to be referencing these ideas in the context of right living in his kingdom with regard to money and wealth. We are to be generous of spirit, seeking to bless others with our abundance, rather than the recourse of the bad-eyed obsession of a selfish and stingy focus that's ultimately horrifically self-destructive for us as we retreat into the darkness within. Are we obsessed with personal security or love for others? What then is our response to the teaching of Jesus that we've just studied together? Where is your heart? Where is your heart? Where are you putting your emphasis? Are you storing up treasure on earth? Are you set on doing that? Or are you storing up treasure in heaven? Remember, where you place your heart is where you place your destiny. How is your spiritual eye health? Do you have a hapless eye, resulting in a generosity to others and to God's kingdom? Or the ponerous eye of selfishness and greed? Who or what has mastery over you? Which do you love more, God or money? May God give us the vision and the grace to live as pleases Jesus in this regard.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope that today's episode has been a blessing to you. Please hit the subscribe button if you would like to be notified when future episodes are published. This has been the Bellevue Chapel Podcast from Edinburgh, Scotland.